Unlike the older Legends games, Pokemon Legends EA actually follows the traditional stat system with having EVs and IVs. So let me explain how all that works in depth. This video is going to be broken down into what EVs and IVs are, how they affect your stats, and then how to optimize them. There's going to be chapters in the description if you're looking for specific information, so go ahead and use that to skip around if you like. Let's start with what IVs are. IVs are individual values which are assigned to a Pokemon when it spawned. They range from 0 to 31 and impact your stats by boosting them by a certain amount, depending on the IV value, and the amount your stat is boosted by is also dependent on your Pokemon's level. For example, at level 100, a single IV point will raise that stat by a single point. So the difference in stats between two Pokemon of the same species at level 100 is in the IVs. Let's use these two Charizards to explain. They're both level 100 and have max EVs on their speed and special attack, alongside both having a modest nature. Despite that, they have differing special attack stats, but the same speed. This is purely due to different special attack IVs, since they both have the same speed IVs and the same speed stat. We can tell this with the judge function by pressing in on the right stick and seeing what word describes each stat. You'll unlock this in the postgame. Each word will describe a certain IV range via the following. No good will be 0 IV, decent is a 1 to 10 IV, pretty good is an 11 to 20 IV, very good is a 21 to 29 IV, fantastic is a 30 IV, and best is a 31 IV, which is the maximum value. You may also hear terms like 5 IV Pokemon, and this just refers to how many of the Pokemon's 6 stats are best or 31 IV. Back to the Charizards, one of them has a Hyper Trained IV on their special attack stat, which is equivalent to a best IV. This just means that I bottle cap that stat, which is the only way to change a Pokemon's IV. Bottle capping it will always set it to the max value, and this can be done within the Justice Dojo and talking to this NPC. You can get bottle caps through Royale rewards in the postgame and end of season ranked rewards in the online mode. There's also golden bottle caps which can be obtained in the same way, but will instead make all 6 of the Pokemon stats max. The Charizard with the Hyper Trained special attack IV has a value of 348, whereas the other one has a value of 334 with a pretty good value. There is a difference of 14 stat points, and since we know the value of the Hyper Trained stat is 31, we can assume that the lower value is an IV of 17, since we can just subtract 14 from 31 and get that number. And that does in fact line up with the pretty good range value. There's more intricacies with like breeding and stuff like that, but for Legends EA, this is pretty much everything you need to know about IVs. Now let's get into what EVs are and how they work. Similar to IVs, they're a value that boosts your stat. They're effort values, which as the name implies, and unlike IVs, these are gained instead of being assigned when it spawns. In fact, when you catch Pokemon, it has 0 effort values across the board, with the exception of alphas, specifically in this game, of which will always have 252 EVs in their HP stat. The way you're typically going to gain EVs is by catching or KOing Pokemon. Every Pokemon has a set stat EV that it'll give you. For example, if you KO any of the Pyro from Wild Zone 17, they'll give you 2 special attack EVs. I'll go more in depth later on how to maximize the value you gain from these, but for now just know that any Pokemon you KO or catch will give all the non-fainted Pokemon in your party EVs. So if Pokemon is fainted in your party, it will not be getting any of the EVs. Each individual Pokemon can have a maximum of 500 in total EVs spread throughout their stats, and a maximum of 252 into a single stat. This means that you can max the EVs on 2 of your stats and have 6 EVs left over to put into another stat. Or if you're more intricate, you can spread the 510 EVs through multiple stats for more precise competitive play, but if you're doing that, then you're likely just watching this video as background noise anyways. Getting into the numbers of it like we did with the IVs, instead of how IVs are 1 stat point per IV at level 100, 4 EVs are equivalent to 1 stat point at level 100. However, it is a little different at level 50 and it gets more complicated, but just to simplify, the general difference I've noticed is that the added value you would get at level 100 is halved at level 50 and then rounded down to a whole number. So for example, 252 EVs at level 100 are 63 stat points, and at level 50, they're 31, since 63 divided by 2 is 31.5, but that rounds down to 31. That 0.5 isn't just erased though. It's still there, but it's just not adding anything yet, unless it's combined with another 0.5, which can only happen if your IV value also adds a 0.5, which in fact 31 IV does. So just like at level 100, at level 50 there's a single stat point difference between 252 EVs and 31 IVs, and 252 EVs and 30 IVs. For the most part, you're not going to care about these when playing casually, and honestly you don't even really need to know all this, it's just kind of fun information to know. Which leads me to the next part, how do you optimize your EVs, or essentially how do you EV train a Pokemon? First off for this, you can either feed your Pokemon their EVs, which is really expensive at about 265,000 Pokédollars using vitamins which can be bought at any Pokemon Center. Each vitamin is going to give a total of 10 EVs to a stat depending on which vitamin you're using. Proteins are for attack, calcium for special attack, and carbos for speed, which I feel are really the most important ones to keep in mind. Now, since your stats max out at 252, you need 26 vitamins for each stat, with only 2 being able to reach that 252 value, then another spare vitamin of your choice for the remaining 6 EVs, which is basically a single stat point. You can also combine these vitamins and the special feathers you can pick up off the ground, each of which gives a single EV for its corresponding stat. So you take 25 protein and 2 muscle feathers to total out to 252 EVs in attack. Now, if you don't want to spend a ton of points or rather just KO Pokemon, there's a more efficient way which will basically turn a single KO into the equivalent of a vitamin. This can be achieved with power items, of which can be obtained from side quests, or you can buy them with Mega Shards at Quasartico in the postgame. Here's all the side quests and which power item they give. What these items do is they add 8 EVs to every KO or catch you get, and it's depending on which item you're holding and not what Pokemon you're KOing. So for example, if you're holding the Power Anklet, which adds 8 speed EVs to each KO or catch, and you KO a Pyroar, which gives you 2 special attacks as mentioned earlier, you don't just get plus 10 speed EVs now, instead you get both 8 speed EVs and 2 special attack EVs from the Pyroar. This means that you have to be careful with what Pokemon you're KOing. It also means that if you're holding a Power Lens and KO'd that Pyroar, then you'd get 10 special attack EVs because of the 8 from the Lens and the 2 from the Pyroar, which would then make that equivalent to a vitamin like I said earlier. Before I get into how I personally EV train my Pokemon using power items, I want to quickly mention natures since they also impact stats. Basically, natures will boost one stat by 10% and lower another by 10%. You can tell what the nature your Pokemon has is doing based on these red up and blue down arrows in the stat screen. If you don't see the arrows, you likely have a neutral nature like Serebii's, which doesn't affect your stats at all. If you want to change your Pokemon's nature, you're going to need mints, of which can be bought here to the left of Area 3, and the main good ones in my opinion are Adamant and Modest, with Adamant being primarily for physical attackers and Modest for special attackers. There's a bunch of other natures which do have a combination of ups and downs, but note that none of them are going to affect your HP stat at all, as that is the only stat without any corresponding mint. To start, if you're wanting to use an existing Pokemon you've been using, you've likely got a ton of random EVs on it. You can check this by scrolling down with the right stick on your Pokemon stat graph, and you can completely remove these EVs at the Rust Syndicate by talking to the receptionist, and for 5 Mega Shards, she'll wipe all the EVs off of any of your Pokemon. Now let's get into the best Pokemon to KO for these stats. For special attack, I KO the 6 Pyroar in Area 17, the 2 Mareep in Area 1, and the Flaffy and Ampharos in Area 16. This totals out to be about 109 EVs to your special attack if your Pokemon is holding the Power Lens. And it's in a pretty decently quick cycle too. It takes roughly 5 minutes for these guys to respawn after getting KO'd. Additionally, if you're in the post game, then Area 20 also has Roserade and Gardevoir, which both give 3 special attack EVs or 11 with the Power Lens. I won't be showing that for any potential spoilers. There's more to add to that shortly though. For physical attackers, I go to Area 13 where there's 2 Heracross, 3 Weeping Bell, and 2 Pinsir. Yes, I'm also surprised Weeping Bell gives attack and not special attack EVs. Then in Wild Zone 8, literally everything except for Numel and Camerupt will give exclusively attack EVs, and with just these 2 areas you can get upwards of like 150, 160 attack EVs if your Pokemon's holding a Power Bracer. Also, quick before this last set of Pokemon to KO, within Area 8 you can also buy berries from a stand, which will decrease the EVs of a specific stat by 10 EVs. So if you accidentally KO a Numel or whatever it may be, then you can just buy one of these to remove those EVs that you gained. Lastly, I want to cover where to farm for speed EVs since your attacking stats and speed stats are really just the most important ones in this game. Because if you didn't know, speed affects how fast your move cooldowns are. Now, this selection of Pokemon to KO for your speed stat is smaller, but the 3 Pikachu in Area 3 and a bunch of Furfrou in Area 19, and with these 2 together in a Power Anklet, you'll get like 90 speed EVs or so, but that kind of goes into this next bit of advice to kind of mix and match. And what I mean by that is, for example, I'm EV training this Roserade in speed and special attack, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to KO all the Pokemon for special attack and speed EVs while holding a Power Lens to maximize my special attack. Once my special attack is max, which is indicated by the sparkles when checking its EV graphs, then I swap the lens for the Power Anklet, and then I repeat the cycle to maximize my speed stat, and for the last 6 EVs I'll just KO any of the remaining Pokemon with a different power item based on which stat I want those 6 in. Typically it's going to be HP though. If you're a little less patient, on Serebii you can check what EVs each Pokemon gives, and can even sort by what EVs you want to look for. I just tried keeping this relatively short and sweet. I'll leave a link to this page in the description below. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys found this information informative, or at the very least entertaining, and if you did, then I'd appreciate if you liked and subscribed. I got more content planned for this game, so stay tuned for that. Have a great rest of your day, and adios!